Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we grab a stack of sources, jump right in, and we'll pull out the key stuff you need to get informed fast.
Yeah, it's kind of your shortcut, helps you cut through all the noise and really get what's in the documents themselves.
Exactly. And today we're focusing on just one specific document. It's a press release,
Yeah.
and it really zooms in on a proposed plan for the historic SS United States.
Right. So our source today is this press release. It's dated May 27, 2025, and it comes from Jason Wade and Caleb Schultz. They're described in the document as independent advocates. They operate under the name the Gibbs Legacy.
And our mission, a goal for this deep dive, is pretty straightforward. We're going deep into this one document. We want to understand the urgent warning and the really specific worries that this group is raising about this idea of sinking the SS United States.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about understanding the arguments they're presenting right here in this press release.
Exactly. We're sticking, strictly to the information and the viewpoint that's laid out right here in this source.
Okay, so first things first.
Okay.
According to this press release, who exactly are the Gibbs Legacy?
Well, the document introduces Jason Wade and Caleb Schultz as these independent advocates, right? And their focus is, it says, environmental conservation and maritime heritage.
Okay.
It also makes a point of saying they have this shared mission, but they operate independently from the New York coalition to save the SS United States. So separate entities.
Gotcha. And it mentions their group, the Gibbs Legacy, wasn't just set up for the history part, but specifically, and I'm quoting here, to amplify concerns about the profound impact certain actions will have on our world's ecosystems.
Yeah, and that framing is, I think, pretty important because it immediately tells you, or at least tells you what they want you to know about their priorities as laid out in this release. Environment first, basically.
Okay, so with that context in mind, what's the main issue they're tackling in this specific document?
According to this press release, the absolute core issue is a proposal, an idea, to sink the historic SS United States.
Sink it. To do what?
To create an artificial reef, off the coast of Florida specifically.
Wow. Okay. And their position on this, as it's presented here, it sounds like it's pretty strong. How does the document actually describe this proposal?
Oh, they don't hold back at all. The press release calls the plan not just disrespectful to history, but an immediate and long-term catastrophe for the marine ecosystem.
Catastrophe. That's a big word.
It is. And they go on, they claim it would make ocean warming worse and set a dangerous and irresponsible precedent, basically politics winning out over environmental protection.
Okay, catastrophe needs some backing up. Let's unpack why they use that word. What are the specific environmental concerns they detail in this press release? What's threat number one?
So the document leads with this idea of introduction of invasive species and ecosystem collapse. Their point is, if you sink this huge ship, you're creating this, unnatural habitat.
Right.
And that unnatural habitat could become a breeding ground for species that don't belong there, invasive species.
And they give a specific example, don't they?
They do, yeah. They focus right in on the lionfish.
Ah, lionfish, yeah.
The worry, as they stated in the release, is that lionfish could just, completely take over. They could decimate the native fish populations.
Which, the document argues, throws the whole natural food chain out of whack.
Right.
And could even lead to, a localized ecosystem collapse, endangering the fish and creatures that are supposed to be there.
Exactly. That makes sense, intuitively. You drop something new in, especially something aggressive with no predators. Things get unbalanced fast.
Okay. So that's invasive species.
Yeah.
Building on that idea of introducing harmful things, what's the next big concern they raise in the press release?
The next major point is toxic pollution and bioaccumulation. They argue the ship itself, because it's old, is basically full of hazardous materials.
Okay, what specific materials does the document actually list? Are they named?
Yep, they name names. The press release mentions lead-based paint, residual fuel, PCBs, asbestos, and it adds other toxic substances.
That's quite a list.
What?
Definitely stuff you don't want just floating around in the ocean. And the concern, according to the Gibbs Legacy here, is what happens when you actually put the ship underwater.
Well, the document says submerging it pretty much guarantees continuous leakage of these pollutants, just constantly leaching out right into the ocean.
Okay.
And they argue this poses a, quote, direct and severe threat to marine life.
And they take it a step further, right? They connect this leakage to that bigger environmental process, bioaccumulation.
They do. The press release points out that these toxins, because they don't easily break down, could lead to bioaccumulation. Meaning small organisms absorb the toxins, then bigger things eat them, and the toxins get more concentrated as you go up the food chain.
Ah, right, so it builds up.
Exactly. And they say it ultimately impacts human health because we eat seafood that might come from those contaminated areas.
So it's not just the fish and the coral. It potentially comes back to us. The document also mentions something specific about it being a big metal object in salt water, another chemical reaction.
Good point, yes. The press release specifically mentions galvanic corrosion.
Galvanic corrosion.
Remind me. It's basically an electrochemical process. It happens when you have different kinds of metals touching each other in something like salt water, which conducts electricity.
Okay.
And they claim this corrosion, sped up by this huge metal structure sitting there, would release heavy metals and other harmful byproducts straight into the water, adding yet another layer of pollution.
Okay, so we've got invasive species potentially moving in. We've got toxic gunk and heavy metals potentially leaching out constantly. What about the environment that's already there? The natural habitat.
That's their third main area of concern, which they title Disruption of Natural Marine Habitats and Vulnerable Species. The argument here is pretty simple. Dropping a massive ship onto the seabed fundamentally changes the natural seafloor habitat. It covers it up, alters it.
Which, this source argues, pushes out the native species that live there and messes up the established food webs, the relationships that evolved over, a long time.
Precisely. And they don't just leave it general. They actually mention specific sensitive species they think could be badly affected.
Like yellow-cup coral? Was that it?
Yes, exactly. They list yellow-cup coral and also refer to other delicate benthic organisms.
Benthic meaning living on the bottom.
Right, seafloor dwellers. The document stresses that these organisms are crucial to the ecosystem's health. So displacing them, they argue, is a big deal. And they also worry that this new altered environment could attract problem species like fireworms, which could throw things even further out of balance.
Okay, so disrupting what should be there may be attracting things that shouldn't. Now, this press release also links the sinking plan to something much bigger. Ocean warming. How do they make that connection?
This is their fourth main point, exacerbating ocean warming. It's an interesting one. The document claims that putting a huge non-native structure like the SS United States into the ocean, well, it's not just like dropping a rock. They argue it can subtly change things like local water currents and thermal dynamics, basically how heat moves around in the water nearby.
And how does that link to temperature then?
According to this source, these changes could actually contribute to localized warming effects in that specific area. But maybe more importantly, they claim it could interfere with the ocean's natural ability to regulate its own temperature. And the Gibbs Legacy calls that ability a critical factor in the bigger fight against global warming.
Wow, okay, that's a significant claim. Connecting the sinking of one ship to the huge issue of global ocean temperature regulation. It definitely shows the breadth of their environmental concerns as they present them here. Now, the press release also has a direct quote from Jason Wade, one of the advocates. What does he specifically say?
Yeah, Jason Wade is quoted saying, "This proposal is a stark and alarming illustration of political interests brazenly overshadowing sound environmental stewardship and the urgent need to address ocean warming." So he's very clearly pointing the finger at politics overriding science.
And he kind of doubles down on that, right? Saying the decision appears to prioritize short-term economic gains over the long-term health of our oceans, the integrity of our marine biodiversity, and the well-being of future generations.
Yep. And his demand, as quoted right there in the release, is pretty blunt. Environmental decisions must be rooted in rigorous scientific assessment, not political expediency or historical romanticism. No gray area there.
Right. So, okay, they've laid out all these environmental worries. We've heard Jason Wade's strong statement. Then the press release kind of shifts gears, doesn't it? It makes a direct appeal. They call it a resounding call to action.
Yes, exactly. They urgently call on the public, on you listening, to unequivocally oppose this environmentally destructive and short-sighted plan.
And they're calling on lawmakers, decision makers, to prioritize robust environmental protection, scientific integrity, and public health above all political considerations. It really ties back to that tension Wade highlighted between politics and science.
It does, yeah. And they don't just say oppose it. They give specific actions people can take to make their voices heard, according to this document.
Okay, like what do they ask people to do?
Well, first, they ask the public to sign their petition. It's on change.org, and they provide the specific link right in the release.
Okay, a petition. What else?
And they're clearly trying to mobilize people online. The press release lists several specific hashtags they want people to use on social media.
Which hashtags?
Let's see, they list hashtag saves United States, hashtag stop ocean pollution, hashtag protect our oceans, hashtag science over politics, hashtag climate action now, and hashtag ocean warming crisis.
Wow, those hashtags really cover the whole spectrum of issues they're trying to tie this ship proposal into, don't they?
They really do. They definitely paint a broad picture of concern.
And finally, the press release sort of brings it back to the ship itself, but frames its symbolism from their perspective. How do they put that?
They say the SS United States is more than just a ship. It is a powerful symbol of our collective responsibility to safeguard the natural world and combat the escalating crisis of ocean warming.
So for them, its fate isn't just about history, it's symbolic of our current environmental choices.
That seems to be the message, yeah. They end their call to action by urging people to unite, protect the environment, and make sure science, not politics, decides what happens to marine ecosystems.
And just for completeness, if anyone listening wants to follow up or contact the Gibbs Legacy directly at these specific points raised in the release, it does list contact info for Jason Wade. He's listed as founder and environmental advocate, and the email is thegibbslegacyofficial@gmail.com.
Right, and that really covers the key arguments and the urgent tone presented in this specific press release from Jason Wade and Caleb Schultz.
Okay, let's just pull back for a moment. So in this deep dive, remember, we focused only on the perspective and the information presented in this one source, the press release from Jason Wade and Caleb Schultz, acting as the Gibbs Legacy.
We've systematically walked through their specific worries about sinking the SS United States as an artificial reef. And as presented here, these worries include major environmental risks.
Yeah, like pollution from hazardous materials, the PCBs, asbestos leading to bioaccumulation.
Right, and the introduction of invasive species like lionfish disrupting the ecosystem.
Plus damaging sensitive habitats, hurting things like coral.
And even, according to them, potentially affecting local ocean temperatures and the bigger picture of ocean warming regulation.
So we've really tried to understand their argument, as laid out in this document, that this plan is, in their view, an environmental catastrophe driven by politics, ignoring science.
And we've seen their very clear call to action, asking the public to sign petitions, use hashtags, and demand environmental protection be prioritized, all drawn straight from the text they provided.
So now you've had a chance to hear one detailed argument against sinking the SS United States. You've heard the specific environmental claims they make and the reasons behind their call to action, all directly from how the Gibbs Legacy presents it in their press release.
Exactly. Just this one perspective, unpacked.
Which leaves us with maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Given these specific environmental concerns raised in this document, the toxic materials, the invasive species risk, the potential impact on ocean temperature, how might someone weigh the undeniable historical significance of a ship like the SS United States against these potential long-term ecological impacts if these particular claims, as presented here, turned out to be accurate?
Yeah, what does this specific viewpoint, the one we just explored from this press release, tell us about the really tough choices involved when we try to manage historical artifacts in a world that's also facing, well, pretty urgent environmental crises?
Something to think about after digging into this particular source.